Hey everybody, what's up? This is Cogdistance for headsupsitandgo.com, and I'm going to give you once again a taster video looking at the Full Tilt Heads Up Super Turbos, and this one's going to deal very briefly with pre-flop strategy. I'm not going to go through the entire strategy, that would take several videos, but I'm going to have a look at your button play from 20 to 25 big blinds. Okay, so having a look at 20 to 25 big blinds from the button in Heads Up Super Turbos against an unknown opponent, I would be min-raising a fairly wide range, including Ace X, King X, and Queen X, possibly Jack X against some people, depending on how I feel. Definitely I'd be min-raising suited connectors, for example 7-8 of hearts, 5-6 of diamonds, as well as Broadway cards, which would include, say, 10 Jack up to Ace King, and also all pocket pairs, unless I was limping with Aces, Kings, or Queens in order to trap my opponent, which I sometimes do against random opponents, hoping they'll raise me or I can sort of commit them on one pair post-flop. That's against a random opponent. Against opponents who have different traits, I would adjust my pre-flop raising game, or my pre-flop game, and against, for example, tight passive opponents, I would be widening my raising range, because the blinds are very valuable at all blind levels, and I simply want to be taking as many free blinds as I can. So I would be playing almost 100% of my hands, except for absolute junk like sort of 6-2 or 9-3. If it has any value whatsoever, I'd be raising it against a tight passive player until they adjust. Against loose passive opponents, or what we also call calling stations, I would be limping my average hands, because I do not want to be inflating the pot, and I'm assuming I don't have much fold equity pre-flop. My junky hands, like we talked about before, 6-2, 9-3, I'd just be folding, and my good hands I'd be raising. That would actually be a narrower raising range than against your average opponent, so I'd probably be raising King 9 or better, and of course pocket pairs. I wouldn't bother raising suited connectors, you might as well see a flop with those. I'd be raising broadways and of course aces. Against tight aggressive opponents, I'd probably be raising about 75% of my range. I think that's a pretty good number there. You want to have you don't want to be raising too aggressively, or they'll start 3-betting you, but you do need to stay fairly aggressive against those guys. They will be doing the same to you. And finally, against loose aggressive opponents, I would consider a more sort of limpy style, because I don't want to get my average hands 3-bet after a raise, and then it's a sort of difficult spot. You might be having to give up too many average hands. I'd rather limp those average hands, and depending on what he does against my limps, I'll then adjust. If he's very aggressive against my limps, I would be limping strong hands and shoving over the top, or average plus hands and shoving over the top, because I'll be better than his range. If he's very passive against my limps, then I'll start widening that range. Okay, so that gives you an idea of the sort of theory of 20 to 25 big blinds. What I'll do now is go through the hand replayer and just give you a few examples of me doing this, so not only can you see it in theory, but you can see it in practice as well. Okay, so we'll have a look at a few matches in the hand replayer, and we'll probably get like 4 or 5 hands from each match before we're outside the 20 to 25 big blind level. And pocket jacks, of course, I'm raising against anyone unless they are very aggressive and attack my limp. So that's a standard raise. Move along to the next hand. King 9, a raise against a random opponent. And next hand here, 10-4. This particular opponent I know is fairly tight aggressive. I'd be raising a very wide range against him, and therefore that includes 10-4. And King 4 also would be within my raising range. And that takes us outside of 20 to 25 big blinds, so I'll go look at another match. This next opponent is fairly tight, so we can have a look at the raising range against him. And here we go. Pseudo connectors against type players certainly, and against random players. And we get a fold, as you can see. Queen 3, this is also a raise against random or tight players, and also tight aggressive players. Alright. King 9, standard raise. Jack 5, I wouldn't be raising this against a random opponent, but against this guy he's folded to all of my pre-flop raises so far pretty much. Or maybe he called one, I forget, but it doesn't matter. He's been folding a very, very high percentage, so I would widen my raising range to include this. Alright, and now we're outside of 20 to 25 big blinds. Here we are against a random opponent, someone I haven't played before, and I get ace-ace in the first hand. At this blind level, I would normally raise this hand pre-flop. I think that limping it is a little bit risky, but I decide to mix things up and limp, which is okay, and then I get 3 streets of value when he hits top pair. So it is okay sometimes to limp, say, aces, kings and queens. There can be 2 advantages to this. First of all, if they turn out to be aggressive, they may well attack your limp, which allows you to 4-bet them pre-flop, or at least get a c-bet out of them. And of course the second one is that they might hit something and you can take a big pot, but you are taking a risk. So consider limping aces, kings and queens against random opponents more when you're shallow, which I'll talk about in future videos, but it's not terrible this deep. Alright, another random opponent, and Queen X is in my raising range against random guys. So that's that hand. 6-2 I consider junk. I wouldn't play this hand against any opponent, even if he was very passive and would let me limp. I just don't think that we're deep enough to be playing hands this bad. Alright, ace-5 is a raise against pretty much anyone. And then, just for interest, if he 3-bet me and I had no knowledge, I would let this go. Their 3-betting range is generally going to be stronger than ace-5, and that's one of the things that I see people do, is raising ace-x and calling shoves when you know that their shoving range is going to dominate you. When you are this deep, you do not want to be getting it in with ace-x. Alright, moving along. Jack-x, I don't think against a random opponent is a great raise, especially Jack-2, so fold that one. And oops, we're already out of 20 to 25 big blinds, but you get the idea there. Okay, let's have a look at one last example here. I think by now you should be getting the idea. So ace-x against random opponents I would raise. Against super aggressive guys, I may choose to limp shove or simply limp and see what they do, but against a random opponent, raise. Queen 9, good enough to raise against a random opponent, also a tight aggressive opponent. Against a loose passive opponent, I would limp this simply because there's no need to raise pre-flop. It'll play quite well post-flop and I just see a flop. And against a tight passive opponent, of course, I would raise this. Right. 9-3, I'm not playing against anyone, just let that go. And ace-queen, of course, standard raise. And we're still at more than 20 big blinds, so king 9 would be a raise. And 8-3, just let go. So normal type poker against average opponents. Jack 8, I would... It's an interesting hand. This guy has been reasonably tight. I would consider widening my pre-flop raising range to include Jack 8, which I do. And we're outside of 20 big blinds once again, so I hope you've enjoyed this video where we just have a look at the 20 to 25 big blind level from the button, and I'll be completing this series by looking at obviously 20 to 25 big blind level from the big blind, and also looking at other blind levels against different opponents, and of course post-flop play as well. So I hope you've enjoyed it, and if you want to see more, go and check out headsupsitandgo.com. Until next time, this has been Cog Dissonance, and I hope you run good.